bring in our front bench. Former BC Premier Christy Clark is here. She's a senior advisor with Bennett Jones. Marco Mendicino is former Chief of Staff to Prime Minister Mark Carney and a former Liberal Cabinet Minister as well. CTV political analyst and former Conservative Industry Minister James Moore is with us. He's now a policy advisor at Edelman. And rounding us out this evening, Tony Clement served in senior roles in Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper's cabinet. He's now CEO of Tony Clement International. Hi, everyone. Happy Thursday. Marco, not to say that you're a betting guy. If you were, what are the chances that this budget leads to an election?
Well, I think for those who are betting for an early Christmas present are better off betting for the Blue Jays to win the World Series than having a federal budget. That said, I think we need to be vigilant around complacency, and that's why you're hearing Steve McKinnon setting up these warning flares, in effect telling parliamentarians across the aisle and telling all Canadians, look, we've got a budget. There are important choices that need to be made. Choices around spending, choices around investing when it comes to housing, when it comes to the defense manufacturing sector, when it comes to investing in people. And let's not be complacent about it. Let's not fall asleep at the switch, because then you do get a Joe Clark scenario where, you know, potentially there is a defeated budget and then we're back to the polls. And I don't think Canadians want that. Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that, James, and sort of what could lead to that kind of, I guess, holiday surprise. Your thoughts on the potential likelihood of something like that occurring, and what will you be watching as far as kind of political jockeying in the next number of days ahead of Tuesday?
I mean, you know, my best guess is maybe a 20%, 25% chance that we'll have an election campaign. And by the way, I think that would really be tragic. It'd be really bad for the country. We have enough economic uncertainty, trade and tariff uncertainty, and instability going on across the country, and certainly more acute in certain regions of the country. This is the last thing we need, and it's really unfortunate that we might be on the cusp of something like this, destabilizing like this, given the momentum that we've had in recent past around major projects, initiatives, breaking down internal barriers to trade, you know, people saying that they're committed to work together in the face of the threat of Donald Trump's tariff and trade policies. I think that would be really tragic. You know, what's unknown, look, the Conservatives are not going to support this, and it's going to be hard for members of Parliament to find excuses not to show up and vote one way or the other. The idea that people can sort of fake or feign illness in order to get away from a vote. You can vote remotely now as members of Parliament, so you really actually have to have a reason not to be there. I'm looking at the NDP. The Bloc Québécois have their reasons to vote for it or to vote against it. The Conservatives have been pretty stalwart and clear in their opposition to this. But the NDP, I mean, it's a caucus of 7 members of Parliament. You have a pretty invisible and ineffectual interim leader in Don Davies. It's Don Davies plus 6 basically independent members of Parliament, one of whom is running for the leadership of the NDP, saying that it was a mistake for Jagmeet Singh to have had the confidence supply agreement and to get in bed with the Liberals. So how does she turn around and then not show up and vote when she's running for leader? So I don't know how we reconcile the NDP vote margin here that the Liberals will need. So it's a bit of a dog's breakfast, but it's for Prime Minister Carney to sort it out.
It does feel, Christy, like the NDP will be key here for a couple of reasons. As James articulated, both the Conservatives and the Bloc have laid out a very specific set of demands. I should point out that the government met with the Bloc yesterday, and there might be some wiggle room on some of the demands, but some of them, like OAS boosting, for example, just don't seem really fiscally feasible. The NDP has been the only party that hasn't laid out specific markers. In fact, has been so explicit in the interim leader to say, you know, I'm not at this point going to draw any red lines. I'm very interested in the investment side of things, and I don't want to see big cuts. But to James's point, like, I don't even know how much power he can exercise over his caucus.
No, well, first of all, let's take a minute to say God bless Don Davies. He's a great member of Parliament from BC, and he is dealing with an impossible situation. It's true. His caucus is all just, they're not voting together. They're all trying to get rid of each other. I mean, it's the most poisonous little group of people that he's stuck leading. God bless him for taking the job on. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, when you look at the Conservatives and where they are in the polls, which is terrible for them. I mean, in terms of a potential outcome if an election was held today, you look at the NDP and how disorganized they are. The Bloc, which is a sometimes unpredictable group, none of them really have a great interest in having an election happen, because if an election was held soon, it's very likely that Mark Carney would be elected with a bigger with a majority rather than the minority he holds now. So building the budget is going to be tricky. There's no doubt about that. But I think my My sense of Mark Carney is that he isn't a really he's not political gamesmanship. He's not Pierre Poilievre. He's a guy who's really trying to think about what do we do to make the country better. So what you'll see in the budget will be thoughtful and I think sometimes very difficult decisions that they've had to make for the country. So, your last guest was talking a little bit about this, Vashi. I think they are going to have to really crack down on the number of civil servants that have been added to the federal government. They should be thinking about dramatically shrinking departments of the federal government, which are represented in provincial governments all across the country. And then they should be thinking about, and they will be thinking about it, because it's 22% of their spending at any given time, is transfers to the provinces. So how are they going to decide are they going to cut those transfers, or are they going to make those transfers contingent on better behavior from governments that are just big spending, deficit building governments across the country? We've got a few. I happen to live in one of those.
Yeah, they haven't signaled anything on that, I can say unequivocally, except for to say during the campaign, especially that they weren't going to cut transfers to either individuals or provinces. But I take your point. And on the point that Christy makes, Tony, around the Prime Minister's intention with the budget, I totally understand that there might be intent there to use it as a very important planning document. But we're in a minority, so it is also inherently political.
Every budget is political. Every single budget, every year, or in this case, every 2 years, is a political document. And I'm going to hearken back to what Marco was talking about, 1979. I remember it well. Some of your viewers will too, where Joe Clark and John Crosby presented a budget with an 18-cent a gallon in those days tax hike on gas. And that became the marker for why that budget should not pass. So we can talk all we want. My esteemed panelists, I love them all. We could talk all we want about the chances of the budget passing, but it could be, Vashi, that there is something hidden in that budget that no one has predicted yet that is going to be the point of contact where people are going to say, holy smokes, we never voted for that. And the opposition parties could unite and say, you know what? This is we want to run an election on this aspect of the budget. So I wouldn't put it as extremely unlikely that the budget will not become a turning point for this government, and in fact will not have the votes to pass. It depends what's in the budget.
Do you think that the people writing the budget right now, Marco, are fully aware of the potential politics of it and the fact that, like, this is something that could lead to an election, and therefore internalizing that in the design of it?
Yes, which is why, one, the Prime Minister has met and engaged with members of the opposition at the leadership level, and two, because according to your sources, which are always very good, Vashi, there is still space to finalize the budget. Now, how much space is an open question, but I think it signals to the public that the Prime Minister and the government do remain open to working with parliamentarians of all partisan stripes. And that, in a minority parliament, is the kind of responsible, stable value set that you want to project.
Last word to you on this, James.
Yeah, look, the budget sets apart blocks of funds and can identify specific programs and commitments. But after you get past the budget, the presentation of the budget, there can be negotiations with the Bloc or with the New Democrats to have a particular fund about which, or a particular program about which, the New Democrats can hang their hat on and say to progressive voters, there's enough there that we think that we can vote for this. The question is whether or not Don Davies can corral those 6 votes, or whether or not the Liberals can persuade enough people in the Bloc to either stay home. So it's going to be a very shaky dynamic. It's unfortunate that we're here. It's up to the Prime Minister. It's his obligation to build the parliamentary coalition necessary to sustain his government. He made that commitment to Canadians and to the Governor General, and we'll see how it looks in the coming days. But there's room for him to maneuver within the budgetary framework if he finds that he doesn't have the support immediately on Tuesday.